Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 Hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're blessed to always be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. And today we are joined by probably our favorite guest. Not even probably. Laz, you are our favorite guest. Yeah. I just we like Keith Smith and some other people too.
Keith is definitely above me on the power rankings.
No. Like we gotta keep the love going. But Laz, look at the chat already, man. People just Laz, exclamation points.
Come on, man. The people are here for you.
I think me and Omari could just leave and let you cook here for the next 60 minutes and people will be happy.
Please don't.
Laz Jackson is here with us. Omari and I always love when he is able to join us. We are talking full Pistons offseason, the new hiring, the firing, the draft, free agency, all of this. We'll get to as much as we can. If you guys have comments, questions, just put them in the chat. I'm sure Laz would love to answer them as well. As always, please rate, review, subscribe, like, thumbs up, whatever you got to do wherever you're listening. We appreciate it. Laz, how's life? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the extremely warm welcome. It's great to see you guys. This offseason has been fast but slow. And so it's only going to pick up pace. And so I'm excited about that. The finals have been a little bit disappointing, but other than that, things are good. So I'm really happy to be here and talk about the Pistons with you too.
Real quick here. We got a message from Copenhagen. I will not try to say your name because I will butcher. So I apologize. But there you go. This is why we have Laz on. They say first time live after a year. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks for joining us. Laz, who's your, I don't want to ask who your pick is for the finals because I'm sure
how many games?
Everybody, how many games is it going to go? Yeah.
Wait, how many games is what going to go?
The finals.
Oh. I originally picked Dallas before. I kind of want to stick with that, but man, they absolutely needed to win that game last night, right? That was they turned the ball over too much and they missed too many free throws, but Boston's whole thing is getting up 40, 50 threes, and if they only make 10, you have to win that game. Yeah. And they didn't. So now it's looking like a 6-game series, at best, which is a little disappointing. But I was hoping for the big, epic 7-game series between, Boston's made the finals and Dallas hasn't made the finals. But again, two new teams to the championship, our stage. And it kind of looks like we're not going to get that as much. But that's okay.
The offseason debate now is going to be, are we back in the big 3 era? Can you not just get it done with 2 guys? I feel like the NBA's cyclical and we kind of got away from the big 3 thing, every team having elite duos, and now we're right back. It's going to be, well, how does Dallas get their Kristaps, right? And we're going to see, I wonder if we're going to see this arms race again, which I don't think you can with the new cap anyway, but I just wonder how this will affect things going forward because Boston is just so strong at top. It's just crazy.
Yeah, your old colleague John Hollinger had a really nice piece at this at The Athletic about I think this will be 6 different champions in the last 6 years, and how Boston is really set up well for success because of the Drew extension, because they have Al Horford a relatively low number, because the Jays are going to be paid a lot, but they managed to trade for all of their guys instead of signing them as free agents, and so they have bird rights and they can keep these guys in place. And so if Boston can keep everything together with the second apron and not being able to trade guys or acquire other free agents, or your draft pick's going to be locked or whatever, if they can make it through that, they'll have a really quality squad. It'll be incumbent on the rest of the teams in the NBA to catch up to them.
Well, and at the end of the day, they've been to 3 straight Eastern Conference finals. They've been to the NBA finals 2 out of 3 years. And if they finish this one off with a win, that's a decent 3-year stretch run. And you can say now they've gotten over the hump. They've went through the hard times, the experiences. They know who they are, yada, yada, yada. But let's talk some Detroit Pistons.
Let's talk the other end of the spectrum.
The exact opposite end of the spectrum.
Opposite end. Okay. We do have some news. We don't have new news, but we have news since the last time we talked with you. Let's just start with the beginning of this president of basketball operations things, Laz. What was your thoughts on announcing the position, how they handled it, how long it took? other people, other names that maybe you would have been excited about? You know, like, do you think they should have tried to wait out Tim Connolly or gone, you know, and we'll talk about Trajan and Troy and that stuff in a second. Just what were your overall thoughts on the process and the idea behind this position?
I thought Trajan was a very solid hire. I know the search, it felt like it took a long time, but I would rather have it take a long time and feel comfortable with the result than have it be a rushed process and it end up with somebody that I wasn't in favor with. Like there were reports about certain candidates that I was like not very excited about, and Langdon was not one of those guys I was excited about the hire. I feel similarly about the way that Trajan is handling the search for a new GM and the way that the old GM was let go. It's like, again, like it's taking longer than I would like. Like that's maybe just like a little bit of impatience on my part, but if it ends with the result that like I think is ideal for moving forward with the team, it's like, it's fine. You know, the draft hasn't happened yet. Free agency hasn't happened yet. Like all these things will happen, or things will be in place before like the offseason really gets moving for the Pistons, I think. And so like that is ultimately what matters. Not that like, you know, I need to get these tweets off, right? Like that doesn't matter as much.
That's the funny thing about this time. Well, not really this time of year, but this part of the process for the Pistons, just hire a new decision maker and as somebody who has never been in the seat before. So you can only glean so much about their process. But already, like, there's somebody in my Twitter mentions today who was like, I'm already disappointed with the job Trey just done because he hasn't done this yet. And I was like, it's been like has it been 10 days since he got hired?
What was he supposed to do? Because he hasn't fired Monty yet? Like,
right.
That's what he was saying. He was like, I can't believe this hasn't happened. Like, he's already got like an F grade from me. And like, I guess, how do you get like a gut feeling on, you know, these types of things where you may not necessarily know, like, what do you kind of look for in a hire, and specifically for the Pistons? What did you want to see in the person that they brought in that could make you feel good about what they could do?
I wanted to see somebody who I felt like was a good talent evaluator, but also like not just college, pro as well. My ideal candidate like would have been somebody who has already built a team from the bottom where the Pistons currently are, like into something. That's why I was thinking about, like you guys mentioned, Tim Connolly. Like I always thought that was a little unrealistic. I thought, yes, the ownership situation in Minnesota is very chaotic. Like, yes, we are getting a lot of wild reporting out of Minnesota, but that team is really well set up for the future. And if you have already built this and you believe in it, you kind of want to see it through. And so I thought that would always kind of be the case. But like I looked at like Brooklyn with Sean Marks, and like they seem really stuck, right? And that's a GM who, and that's a person who has built a team through a lot of different ebbs and flows, right? Like they had the really fun like 8th seed Nets with like Spencer Dinwiddie and D'Angelo Russell. They flipped that into the big three, or just the big two at first, with Kyrie and KD. And then KD's unhappy. They add James Harden. Like he's been a guy who's been willing to change course. And like when KD's mad, like you trade him to Phoenix, right? They've been able to do a lot of different team building ways. And I thought that flexibility would be important. Trajan, like for his part, the thing that made me feel good about him was the report that like he was handling most of the personnel decisions in New Orleans. Again, like David Griffin is a name. People know who David Griffin is, but without that kind of insight, it's impossible to say like who is really responsible for these decisions. And it sounds like Trajan had a very heavy hand in a lot of things. And I like what New Orleans has done, even if they haven't had the level of success in the playoffs that you would like to think about for a team. But that hasn't always been their fault. Like Zion's been injured a lot. And like even like this past season, he looked great in the play-in tournament. And then that didn't end up the case. So I was looking for someone who I thought could build sustained success. And it looks like Trajan. And Trajan kind of did that in New Orleans. And so I feel confident that he'll be able to do that in Detroit.
What have your thoughts been in terms of everything since then? Like I even go back to why not just what are your thoughts on this? Why not just fire Troy Weaver as GM and hire Trajan as GM? Like, what are your thoughts on this overall? Okay, we're going to hire a president of basketball operations. Yeah. We're going to hire Trajan. Then we're going to say, okay, this guy gets to decide whether Troy Weaver keeps his job, if Monty Williams keeps his job. And then do you think they're going to bring in a new GM, or do you think they just absolve that into Trajan's position? Like, what are your thoughts on just the process in general of how this has all gone down?
So I think my thing has been, if I were Tom Gores, I would look at the way that the coaching search for Monty was handled and say to myself, like, all right, if I need to stop meddling, like I need to get out of this decision-making process. We have a lot of reporting about the way that coaching search went. Candidates were presented to him. He didn't like them. He didn't trust his decision makers to make a good decision. And he ended up with something he's unhappy with, right? So at this point, it's like, okay, I'm gonna make one decision. I'm gonna hire a guy, one person, and I'm gonna let that person handle their decisions, right? I was like, I'm gonna take a step back and I'm not gonna interfere as much. And so, like, I understand that. I kind of respect it actually, because like, it is a ready-made excuse. Like, if for Troy, like, hey, like you didn't let me hire my coach. It was like that's why this ended up like this. And it's like, that's not really what happened, but I understand how you can make that argument, right? And so that's what I think is happening with the delays and with the more hands-off approach from ownership.
No doubt. Just a couple of confirmations here, and I actually just got the story up on free before we started, but I'm just confirming they added Michael Blackstone, and I think that was pretty obvious just because it was in his Twitter profile. So but
we do have a GM. Is his title GM or his title's like vice
it's
president?
Executive vice president,
but he's the GM. It's fine.
Okay,
it's
so
the same role.
Okay, so yeah, since we're not going to consider somebody a GM anymore, it'll be Michael Blackstone will be executive vice president.
Yeah. And then also with that, the Yahoo report last week that they hired Brooklyn Nets player personnel J.R. Holden, like confirming that as well. And his title is vice executive. I don't know exactly what the role is yet, but
like
they're just going with
GM of scouting, more or less.
I would assume it's probably going to be on that side. It's pretty cool that he was like starring alongside Trajan over in Russia when they won those championships, and they were both on the 2000.
He was also in Detroit, like under scout, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was a scout here. I'm not sure what year he was a scout here, but he was a scout here in Philadelphia before he landed with Brooklyn. So we're starting to get this team kind of slowly together. We kind of touched on it earlier, but obviously there's this Monty decision looming. If you want to go ahead and just dive right into this topic for us here, Laz, just where are you with that on, like, should you bring him back? It's only been a year, this and that, or just where's your gut at so far?
So if I were Trajan, I would want a new coach. I would want full alignment with my like new front office regime. And that means no holdovers. That's no shade to Monty. I think like I liked things he did last year. I did not like things he did last year. But there's cause on both sides to fire him or to retain him. But the thing I will say is that it looks really clear that Monty is not like a huge difference maker in terms of his coaching ability. And but it doesn't really seem like there's a lot of difference makers out there. We see a lot of coaches being cycled through. What were you going to say, Bryce? I hear you.
Like that's just my thing with it is like we just did this 12 months ago where we said Dwayne Casey is the worst. He's not making this team better. Get rid of him. We'll bring in somebody else. And then now I see people going, well, Dwayne Casey could have been. I was like, no. We're not talking Dwayne Casey. There was like 1% of the Pistons fan base that was okay with Dwayne Casey continuing to coach this team. So I'm like you, like, don't you think it just comes down to Trajan's vibe with Monty, and does he see the same vision for this team?
Yeah. And, Trajan has experience with a lot of other coaches around the league. And Monty also has been a lot of places. I know they've both been in New Orleans, but not at the same time. It's like, what kind of vibe does he get from Monty when they meet? Because I'm sure they've met by now. It's like, and if that doesn't work, like, what are you looking for in a coach, right? And so, like, yeah, I would probably let Monty go, but I'm not expecting my next head coach to be a miracle worker. And I do think that resetting the coaching market the way they did with Monty put a lot of expectations on Monty to be a miracle worker in a way that he just like wasn't. It happens.
I mean, I wonder if the difference in expectations, because I think no matter who, I know for me, and like I got caught up in this as well. And that's what I stay out of a lot of the front office stuff. Like, cause like at the end of the day, do we know what decision Trajan made and didn't, or what bad decision maybe he could have made in New Orleans, but somebody overruled him? And I'm not saying that happened, or any of these other guys. Like, I just think even more than players, we know less about coaches' impact, front office impact, who's making the big decisions and those type of things. And so I think for me, I'm probably with you. I just, whatever Trajan decides I think is the right decision. If he feels comfortable with Monty, great. If he doesn't, then let's go find a new coach. I don't think it matters who they hire. I will not have any expectations. If it's JJ Redick, let's say they hire JJ, we can't have expectations. He's never coached before. We have no clue. If it's, anybody else, even if they went after Dan Hurley, like, all I know is that he's great in college. I don't know what he's going to be in the NBA. So for me, it's just like, I'm done having expectations about what coaches can do. I know Spo can coach. I know who else? Who are some other coaches that I like feel really confident? Like Spo's always the one that comes to mind.
Yeah. Ty Lue can coach offense.
Ty Lue. Ty Lue. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like
other than that, like I don't know, man.
I don't know.
Sure. Like I didn't think Jason Kidd was a good head coach.
Yes.
And his team is in the finals, right? Like,
but here's part of that. Sweeney is down there, who used to be with Detroit. There's times over on Game Theory where we like break down their defense. We're like, we love this. This is amazing. And then there's other times we're like, what the heck is going on? It's like, even then, and at the end of the day, we don't know. Is it Sweeney's fault? Is it the players not executing it? Is it because Luka's hurt and doesn't move on defense? Like, there's just so many factors that I don't know that we really know. So I don't know, Omari. For me, I don't get into this front office coaching stuff as much as I used to. I'm just like, I have no idea. Let's get to the draft and free agency. I can at least talk about those guys like with some semi-intelligence.
And that's what's like, it's just fun. Like, I don't really browse Twitter a lot during the offseason, really not even during the season either. I've tried to reduce, but I still see things, and I'll see, people debating, well, is this person going to do this or that or whatever? And it's like, we're basing this off of like vibes. Like, it's literally just vibes. Like, maybe you had a dream last night that told you something was going to happen. Like, that's all we're going off of at this point. But to Lance's point earlier, you can look at somebody's body of work and at least see if there's a correlation with success. And even before New Orleans, he had that run in Brooklyn where they got Dinwiddie and they got I think Jared Allen. They drafted him. They brought in Joe Harris, who was pretty much out of the league at that point. And, I wrote that story the other week, but everybody sort of credited Trajan for being deeply involved in that process. He was also involved in the health side in Brooklyn and in New Orleans, which, I know people think that the Pistons have the worst medical staff in the league, so maybe he could clean
every fan hates their team's medical staff. That's a part of fandom.
It's the ultimate scapegoat.
We know even less about that. Like, as Steven Suggs, like we can at least see the coach. Yeah. Like, we can watch his demeanor on the sideline. Like, I can try to guess at some things, and I can see what he's trying to run on the court. Whether the players actually execute it or not, that's something completely different. I literally know nothing about the training staff. I don't know if they have them doing stuff from the 90s. If they stuff in the future, we have no clue what the training staff is or is not doing. Like, I stay away from that one completely, Omari.
Yeah, because people will say, well, like this guy had this injury at this team, but they got him right. And it's like, well, it's not like a car. Like, you expect every, 2015 Chevy Cruze to be exactly the same, but like the human body doesn't operate that way, Like, some people, like, you may have a cold and it's mild, you may have a cold and it knocks you out for 2 weeks. Like, it affects everybody differently. Long story short, it'll be fun to see over the next 2 weeks sort of what Trajan's process is, right? Because we have the draft coming up and then free agency right after, and that's a lot of information we're going to get in like 2 weeks. I agree, fire Langdon.
Brandon's dog says, I agree, fire Langdon. Like, that one made me laugh. That was good. I enjoy when we can get on here and have some laughs and with Laz. Well played, Brandon's dog. I kind of want to know the story behind that YouTube handle, but very funny right there.
Omari, that was a really well sourced and really well put together piece you had in the free
I appreciate that. Thank you.
That was really well done.
I thought you were going to give him credit for the joke he made a couple episodes ago where he almost made Keith Smith spit his water out.
That was so funny.
Yeah, I got my flowers for that. But
you deserve them.
I appreciate the shout out for the story.
No, Omari picked up the phone and got like a bunch of people whose names I know around the league to say nice things about the GM hire. And I was like, okay, like they didn't have to say that, but they did. So I was like, okay, like let's see how this goes.
Yeah.
All right, Omari, let's go to break. When we come back, let's talk NBA draft. We've talked the front office. We'll get Monty Williams news down the road where we can dive into this stuff anymore. But at the end of the day, the NBA draft is 2.5 weeks away. The Pistons have a top 5 pick, and we got to talk about some players. So when we come back from this short break, Omari will ask Laz about his top 3 favorite.
All right, we are back with segment 2, and we're gonna dive right into the draft, which is just over 2 weeks away. Laz, I've gotten glimpses of your overall draft thought process just from following you on Twitter, but I'm curious to hear just more in depth, just what your Pistons big board is looking at like now, and you can include Sarr and Ricochet there too. Like they probably won't be there, but you never know. So
yeah, no, I was a participant in Bryce Simon's Motor City Hoops big draft compilation board.
Check that out.
I encourage people to check that out. I thought it was a good exercise to take Sarr and Ricochet off the board, just because like I think Sarr definitely won't be there. And it looks the further we get into the process, it looks more like Ricochet's not going to be there either. And so I was like, okay, like maybe those aren't 1-2, but they're somewhere in the top 4. It's like, okay, like we can take those guys off the board safely. So with that said, my number 1 was Donovan Clingan from UConn. I think the rim protection was a huge area of concern for me last season. I've talked to you on this podcast about how much Jalen Duren's regression as a rim protector kind of put me off him and his progression as a player. And so I think taking the time to address that would be the best thing the Pistons could do in the short and the long term. And of course there's the shooting upside with Clingan. I kind of see it. I'm not expecting it to happen, but it's something you'd want to keep an eye on as far as his development goes. But one thing the combine really made clear to me is like, that's a big dude, right? Like that's a really large human in a way that Duren is like very athletic, but he's only 6'10", right? And those on an NBA court, like every inch matters. And so Clingan was my number 1 guy.
Yeah, we talked about Clingan. Actually, at the Pistons taking Clingan in my mock draft that went on Monday. But I feel like the sell for Clingan is like, imagine Derek Lively if he had even better defensive instincts and also were 50 pounds heavier. And that's like, like you essentially have a guy. I mean, you don't get the shooting. Like, I don't think those guys shoot, but you pretty much have everything else you want in the big, whether it's being able to row, play and drop, come up to the perimeter a little bit. But Clingan's a really good passer too. And I think that's what really puts him over the top, is that you could just put shooters around him and Cade. And I mean, I feel like you're pretty much set at point guard and center for the next decade.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I've talked to Bryce a little bit about is I have trouble picking apart Clingan and Castle's passing and offensive acuity with the system under Dan Hurley, who was just coaching laps around these other NCAA coaches. So it's like, is Clingan a good passer or was he just in a really good offense? Right. And I have trouble picking that apart.
I think it is hard, but my thing with the big, because it's not like nobody's drafting Clingan to be like Jokic or Sabonis or Şengün, but I think we've seen him enough. Like he's really nuanced operating dribble handoffs and those type of things. I think he can just make the necessary passes, dribble into a DHO, screen the guy off if he needs to, or just hit the backdoor play if that's what's necessary. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. So in the comments, I'm going to get the link to my Substack where I did that and, reached out to over 40 people. Clingan's was interesting because he finished 2nd overall in this, but he was 1st in the Pistons fans results, which shocked me, guys. It shocked me. And I wonder if that speaks to Jalen Duren and where the fan base is with him. And so I saw this question. I hit the wrong one. But I think it said, would you actually trade Jalen Duren if you made this pick, Laz? This is from Sharon Dalton. They say, my sentiments to Laz, trade Duren and pick Clingan. I'm actually a little bit more open to playing these guys together, not together, but on the same team for a year, because I don't think Clingan comes in and plays 30 minutes a night in the same way Derek Lively didn't play 30 minutes a night for Dallas, and then decide what you need to do. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think trading Duren is like an absolute prerequisite. But I do think that in the long term, you probably can't keep both of them, right? And so, like, maybe Duren makes like huge strides in this offseason and his value's up, and that makes him easier to trade. Maybe Clingan is a little bit less agile laterally in at the NBA level, and so he's not as good a rim protector as you imagined he would be. And so you'll need to move on from him then. But I don't think you like absolutely have to trade Jalen Duren if you draft Donovan Clingan. The thing I do think is that like if you trade or if you draft Clingan and keep Duren, you can't spend $20 million on Hartenstein or Nick Claxton this offseason, right? You don't need 3 centers. You need 2. No and doubt. Stu's still around.
Man, Stu's still around. Yeah. Who's on your board after Clingan?
So my number 2 was Ron Holland.
Okay.
And I don't feel good about that. But I think Ron Holland is the best mix of impact and upside that the Pistons would probably like be available for the Pistons at 5. As the season went on, like he kind of figured it out a little bit for the Ignite. The structure of that team was atrocious at times. So I do think in a more constructive coaching environment, in a more structured like NBA offense, I think we see a little bit more of what he has to offer offensively. And then just like the measurables, the athleticism, there's not a lot of 6'7", 6'8" guys who can move like he does. And there's even like defensive technique things that you can see that like once he learns, like he'll be even more of an impact defender. But I have my own like self-talk where it's like we're still putting non-shooters around Cade. And it's like I understand that, like I hear that, but like I think this is the Pistons' best shot at getting a player who's like actually like something worth something like moving forward.
So where, Bryce, who was the top choice on that big board?
Bryce, who was it?
Yeah.
Oh, let's talk about Ron Holland before we go to the next guy. We will talk about the landslide victory for another player who may or may not space the floor at a decent rate. Here's what I'll say, Laz. You and I talked about this a little bit off air, and the Pistons have $60 million in cap space, all of this stuff. There's 2 major problems with this team: floor spacing and defense. And you can draft somebody like Ron Holland or Steph Castle or somebody like that if you think they're the best player on the board. And I'm with you. I think Ron Holland, listen, there's a real chance he flames out and is Hamidou Diallo. I get it. I will readily admit it. There's also like, he's the guy that looks like a prototypical potential 2-way NBA bucket getter and defender. And what you do if you think it needs to be Ron Holland or Steph Castle or Donovan Clingan is then you spend $64 million only acquiring floor spacing with that money. Like, go get guys that can score the ball, space the floor, and figure it out from there. Like, I don't, other than Risache, I haven't found the dude who like makes sense for this roster that's going to make everybody happy. And we've even seen in the comments, Laz, like people are like bringing up his athletic testing numbers, which like I just don't care that much about because I would rather just go off the film. But I know for some people it matters, and I don't want to discount it. But people hate Risache because there's no upside. But then you bring them Ron Holland, and they don't like it because he can't shoot. It's like you got to take one thing and then figure out some of the other stuff in free agency and building out the rest of the roster.
Yeah, I definitely think it's easier to find guys who can shoot 2% on catch and shoot looks to surround Cade than it is to find like 6'8" guys who can pass, dribble, and defend, right?
Okay, Omari, I know you want to talk about this guy. So again, just to reference back to the the poll that I did, the overwhelming winner of this, which shocked me. I know, Laz, you said before we started recording, it surprised you. Omari, you were not as surprised, but Reed Shepherd blew this away. He was actually second with Pistons fans, but with draft scouts and just general content creators, he was first. He had 17 first place votes out of 40. Nobody else had more than 8. Reed Shepherd. So Omari, Reed Shepherd, and then Laz, will get your thoughts on the Kentucky guard.
Yeah, so Reed being a favorite for Pistons fans. I think he was the overall favorite. You said Pistons fans were a little bit higher on Cleveland, but or was it the opposite?
No. That's Pistons fans actually had Klingon won by it wasn't a lot, but just a little bit. But
but with Shepherd, it's just you look at he shot 50% from 3 and just the all around efficiency. I think he almost had like 3 combined steals and blocks, that being 6-1. Laz, where is Reed Shepherd on the board for you? Is he 3 or is he lower than that? And then just sort of walk us through your belief or non-belief in who he is as a prospect.
So he's 4 for me.
Okay.
I had one guy above him. My thing is, like, I did see he tested really well at the combine, but we have seen guys with plus wingspans be able to cheat the vert in a way that like makes me uncomfortable.
I'm pretty sure it's pretty commonly discussed that he cheated the vert. That like his standing reach doesn't make sense based on the vertical number. Yeah. Like all of that together, he definitely cheated the vert number.
Yeah, but he's not a bad athlete. Like I want to make that clear. Like I don't think he's a bad athlete, but like I don't think he's going to win the dunk contest either, which is like what you would think a guy with a 42-inch vert or whatever he was measured at like would be able to do. But my thing is, like, I like Reed Shepherd a lot. The margins for a 6'2" guard in the NBA are just razor small. And even like I believe in him as a shooter. I believe in him as a secondary guy. You had Richard Stamen on last week, and he was talking about how he didn't think Reed was really a primary, and I believe him, and I agree with that. Again, just because unless you're Jalen Brunson, it's really hard to be a primary at that height. But as a offensive fit next to Cade, it'd be seamless, right? And so I think there's upside there as well. Like I think as he becomes a little bit better of a ball handler and gets to see the floor a little bit more, you could even see further development, and he would be an even better player. And then of course there's the Calipari curse. There's all of Cal's guards always have a little something extra, like when they make the league. And I don't know what it is.
I feel like that's the Calipari blessing. Like curse has like a negative.
Well, it's the curse in college because they never win anything.
Okay, that's true. Okay, yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah, but it's like I don't know what it is for him, but like I'm sure there's something more that he hasn't gotten the chance to do that he would excel at the NBA level. So I like Reed Shepherd a lot. I just had him 4, but like a very strong 4, if that makes sense.
I want to bring this up real quick. So Elisha Israel says, but we already had that role with Sasser. Here's one thing I think we have to consider, guys. They're going to draft what seems like a redundant player almost no matter what. You have Cade as a primary guy. You have Ivy as a combo guard, whatever you want to call him. You have Asar as this defensive, athletic, athlete. And then you have Duren at center. Like the only position you can draft is a true 3-and-D wing. And like, again,
like if Ricochet is off the board, I don't see that dude.
Yeah,
because he's not there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why people like Connect is, even though I think Connect actually makes the most sense if you feel like you have to play all of these guys together. And I think that's what I even do it, Laz, but you talked about last time. Is it really a core 4? Like, does it really have to be? Like, I don't know that it does. So, like, it's okay if you draft a guy and he plays and a couple of guys move to the bench or vice versa. So, yeah, like,
I like Sasser, but like drafting Reed Shepherd to supplant Marcus Sasser is totally fine. Like, it's a poor allocation of resources on Troy Weaver's part, but that's why he's not here, right?
Yeah, well, that's what somebody said earlier. If shooting was so easy to find, why haven't they found one in 5 years? That's why Troy Weaver no longer has a job. Steven Suggs says everybody's tradable except I agree, but this is kind of my point with this draft is we don't know who Trajan likes and who he doesn't. Like, what if he loves Jaden Ivey? What if he hates Jaden Ivey? Maybe he doesn't think Jalen Duren's ever going to be a defender. We don't have the insight to that. And what he thinks about those guys, I do think drives the decision here. Now, I want to go back. Like, people bring up Matas. Are you guys sure Matas can shoot? Because like we hate dudes because they can't shoot. I'm pretty sure Matas shot worse than Ron Holland from 3 this last year in the Ignite. So like, again, this is why this is a flat draft and people aren't excited about it.
Yeah. So and the top 2 prospects were a lot of people just being, of course, Klingon and Shepard too. Like if you're just taking BPA, it's going to be overlap, as you said. Not to cut you off, last.
Yeah. So I talk to people. I don't talk to everybody, but I talk to people. I have talked to people who were at Hoop Summit. Who talked to Trajan, and I've heard what he thinks of the Ignite guys, and it's not great. So I'll say that much, right? Yeah, no, that evaluation sucks. Like as somebody who is trying to do this for a living, like not a living, but you know what I mean? Like trying to do this in a very professional space. It sucks if trying to evaluate that stuff. I'm very ready to be completely wrong on Ron Holland. I'm ready to be too low on Matas Buzelis. Like I just have maybe Tyler Smith, somebody brings up Tyler Smith. Maybe he ends up being the best player. And I wanted to play. Tyler Smith's got great PR. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. But here's the thing. You know what his biggest weakness? He's not a great defender. So again, like this is where, which I'm fine. Okay, let's bring in Dalton Connect and just let him get buckets, right? Well, then now you have to go out and you better find a good big man defender. Yeah, like so Michael says, Sam Vecini says Matas can shoot. I'm just going that because it makes me feel good. Listen. At least he's honest. Yeah, Michael, I get it. Like I argue with Sam about Matas with this. But yes, I will agree that Sam does think that Matas can shoot. Omari, let's let him give his third one. And then I want to ask about trading up and trading back. So who was your third guy? My third guy was Castle, just because like philosophically, I'm looking more for these athletic defensive guys, and that's Castle and Holland over these mainly offense, not as good defensive guys, meaning Shepard and Connect. So I connect 5 for that's the full board, which means Matas was off my board. I don't love Matas. Matas has to fix a lot of different things all at the same time, and like to get all those Lego pieces in place, like it makes me a little nervous. But yeah, Castle at 3. Love the way he plays. Love the energy he brings. You could definitely like see him playing in these playoff series, which is like a big thing. The shot doesn't go in, but it also doesn't look broken. So you hope that it doesn't look like busted in a way that like Asar and Almonds like did last year. So you hope that there's shooting improvements that can be made on that front. And if he can shoot, like he might be a star as well. And so that's why I would have Castle 3. Castle, do you see him as the best perimeter defender in this draft? I know he's discussed as among those types of guys, but is that like how much of the appeal is it just pairing Cade with like this elite defensive type? I think he might be the best like technique perimeter defender in the class. Yeah. But like I have Holland higher because Holland's 2 inches taller and like has got longer arms, right? Like I think you can get if you can get him to a level of technique that Castle is currently at, you have a better defender. But yeah, Castle is that is a big part of the appeal of Castle, is taking a lot of the defensive pressure off of Cade in a way that like Jaden Ivey, for example, like did not do last season. Yeah, I've warmed up to that because of what he would do on the defensive end. And I think the way you said it is perfect. I think Castle's a more quote unquote solid point of attack defender, where Ron Holland's a little more disruptive and is going to make plays. Castle may just stay in front of guys better. And, let's say Michael brought up Sam Vecini earlier. Sam thinks that Castle may have the highest upside in the class because if Castle shoots it, then everything else like really clicks. And you're talking about a real 2-way player with what he can do on the ball. Like Jimmy Butler, if he And not like we've talked about, like, I don't think the reports out there about the point guard stuff is really, I think it's a little bit of game. I don't know if I talked to you guys about that, but that was screamed like
Gamesmanship.
Steering me like away from someplace I don't want to be.
Yeah. But what makes me worried is that they were steering him away from Detroit. Like, you guys have Cade. I want to be a point guard. Don't draft me, but
I think it's more like steer is like, please San Antonio, take me. As opposed to like, I don't want to be in Houston.
And I think that's actually what Sam said as well, is more of like steer him towards teams as opposed to trying to keep him away from teams. Omari, if you don't have anything else on the guy, I feel like we've kind of screwed over Dalton Connect here, but we've talked about him. I think we know he's an awesome fit offensively with some defensive concerns. I want to talk about trade up, trade back, but go ahead, Omari.
Is Connect 5th on your board? I'm just curious to see who number 5 is before.
Yeah, Connect is number 5 on my board.
He's number 5. Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm just going to plug our past episodes for Connect discussion, including last week when we had our guy Richard Stamen on. We'll come back with segment 3, and then we'll dive right into free agency. All right, we're back with segment 3. We're going to get into free agency and trades. I guess we could probably open, trade up, trade down, those types of scenarios. Yeah. That's probably going to be the biggest debate coming into this draft. It's tough to really say what's best without knowing what's on the table. But would you even look to move up in this draft, or would it be more so let's move back and pick up some assets in return?
I think trading back and picking up assets to do it would immediately distinguish Trajan as a different type of GM front office operator than Troy Weaver. And I think I would be really happy to see that. Troy Weaver consistently did not want to do the little things like building assets or, like spending two-way slots on like guys that you actually think have chances to like be players in the NBA. And so like, yeah, if you trade back with Portland for like 7 and 14, right? You trade back with Chicago for 11 so they can move up and get Matas or whatever. I think that, like, yeah, immediately establishing that, like, it's going to be a long-term thing and you're trying to build an asset base would be a really good first sign from Trajan Langdon.
Okay, so here's my question, Laz. If they do that, let's not even talk about the players. And we do have some questions, like somebody brought up Khalil Ware, and there's some other guys we could talk about in this range. Listen, Khalil has some lottery.
I got Khalil Ware thoughts. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, let's do it.
All right.
But before we do that, would you rather he trade back and get future draft assets, or would it be a trade back? And like Kyle Metz brings up, like this being part of a bigger Ingram trade. I guess this would be completely Wes, completely trading out. Bobby Buckets brings up like both picks for Grant 14 and 40. Like, so would it be for future draft assets? Would it be for a current player? Like, what would you be looking for in that regards?
I would prioritize future draft assets before I prioritize like instant impact. I think this team needs to be better than 17 wins next season, but I don't think that they need to win 38 games either. And a guy like Brandon Ingram helps you do that. A guy like Jeremy Grant helps you do that. I just did a podcast with James Edwards, his Detroit Players podcast, and we did our off seasons. And I got to say, like, trading for Jeremy Grant, like, it looked good on paper, but it really like blew a hole in like what you can do with the rest of your flexibility, like moving forward. And so it was like, oh, that was actually like gaming that out, seeing that, I was like, oh, okay, like maybe that's not something I'm as interested in as I thought I would be. But yeah, I would prioritize future assets just because I think one way or another consolidation trades are coming for the Pistons.
Yep.
And having more future stuff to make those deals happen with is good.
Steven Sugg says no team wants to trade a future draft pick for a 2024 pick. Listen,
you would be surprised.
That's what I was going to say, Steven. Like, I was with you 100% that this is not going to happen, but I can talk myself into, if Klingon's there at 5, are you telling me the Grizzlies aren't going to offer something? Like, he just makes so much sense there. Now, I'm not saying you're going to get great value. I'm not saying you're getting awesome value to move back. I just think that there may be a little bit more of that than what we think, because it's so flat at the top. And so people would go, oh, well, why not just set it 8? We think it's flat at the top. But the more I've been in this, like, teams' boards are so different. I've talked to a team about a player who had one team had him like top 10 and another team thought he was maybe a 2-way guy. So like there is going to be crazy variance where Donovan Clingan may be number 1 on a team's board, and they see insane value to get him at 5, or maybe it's Reed Shepherd, maybe it's the upside of Ron Holland. I just think we could be surprised. Maybe we get nothing, but I'm with you, Laz. I think we could be surprised that some team may want to move up.
No doubt. Let's carry that right into free agency. Obviously seems like you're in more of an asset mode, Laz, when you look at this $64 million in cap space. And it's so much cap space that realistically they could probably do several things if it's not just one direction. But are you more so in the category of let's try to consolidate this for assets, maybe eat a bad contract or two, get future first or another young guy? Or is it more so let's just upgrade this roster? We just paid Cade and we just need to move this needle as far forward as we can.
Yeah, we do kind of need to pay Cade.
Yeah. Sort of.
Yeah. I think again, like, you do need to make this team better, but I don't think you have to like fully break the bank to do that. This team was so bad, you can make them better without adding $30 million of Jeremy Grant, right? Yeah. Or the 27-28 it's going to be for Ingram with him having the expectation that he's going to make 40 like next season, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's like you can do other stuff. Obviously, like, there are a lot of names that have been floated about. Malik Monk, one of the centers, like Nick Claxton or Isaiah Hartenstein, if they don't end up drafting Donovan Clingan. Tobias Harris is a name that like was floated around, and then Troy Weaver got fired, and you don't hear Tobias Harris linked to the Detroit Pistons as much anymore. But yeah, I think that like I'm looking at guys who I think like are actual NBA players. I'm also with that much cap space, and there not being you can't bring in Paul George, and you don't need to you can sit on this cap space for a while. I'm looking more at restricted free agents. Like, I'm looking at the Isaac Okoros, I'm looking at Patrick Williams, even like an Obi Toppin.
Yeah.
Like guys who normally teams hate like sitting on, we don't have this 20. We made an offer. We offered this guy 20 million, so we don't have the 20 million for like 4 days. That sucks. It was like, what else are we going to do with this 20 million? Like, let's, make Cleveland pay through the nose for Isaac Okoro, right?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Obi Toppin? So we had a question outside of the draft. Thoughts on Obi Toppin and or Taylor Hendricks? I don't think Taylor Hendricks is really
Taylor Hendricks isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a trade, and it sounds like he's definitely, at least in the short-term plans for the Jazz, to figure that out. I think Obi Toppin may be the most real of the restricted free agents, because they have Pascal Siakam, and then they have Jarris Walker waiting in the wings. And so to me, they're the least inclined to match some offer, especially if it's a little more than you're comfortable. So I think Obi Toppin is interesting. It doesn't help the stuff defensively, but like we've talked about, there's not many guys that are going to solve both ends of the court. I'm kind of interested in that.
It's also like, it's not going to break the bank either, right? Like, you don't have to offer Obi Toppin 4 years, $80 million. You can offer him the mid-level exceptions like $13 million. Wes can check me on that, but I think that's about where it's at. It's like,
or a Bruce Brown type deal, team option.
Oh yeah, like a big balloon thing. Yeah. That could totally work, and he'd make the team better for that short-term period.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm interested to see if they do the Bruce Brown. Before Bruce Brown, it was the JJ Redick contract. Keith Smith said this to us, over a year ago, Omari. You really can't have a bad contract that only has 1 year. And Bruce Brown's contract was essentially 1 year. Like the Raptors are essentially, are we going to be able to, or do we want to pick it up so we can trade it, or, what do we want to do with it? So I think that is interesting. Are there any other, like you brought up Malik Monk. I love Malik Monk just as a player. I enjoy watching him play. I think he can get buckets. I think he can really pass. Is he a great fit here? Like, do you like the idea of Malik Monk coming in, whether it's starting, coming off the bench, just he's a good player. He can really score the basketball, or not as much.
Yeah. I like the idea of Malik Monk. I like the highlights that Malik Monk had last year. If you look at Malik Monk's like basketball reference page, he didn't have as good as a season as you thought he would.
He did not. I was looking at it last night, and I was like, dang, these numbers don't pop off the way I thought for a guy that's, that people are talking about $20 to $25 million a year.
Yeah. And that's my thing is, if it's going to cost you 80, 90, $100 million, like, I don't love it as much.
Yeah.
But with the with the new CBA, with the new TV rights deal, like 2 years from now, 25 million might not be that much. And so it's like, it's livable and it's doable. And again, it makes the team better. And so like Malik Monk is a guy I definitely have interest in, but I am not as interested in him as I feel like other fans are.
Real quick. So I see in the chat, there's a lot of like, Obi, what's that going to do for us? Malik, do you think this team,
Bigs who can shoot?
No,
you can play Obi and Asar together. Like, that's your 4 or 5. Come on, guys. Like, think outside the box.
My vibe is people think that they need to star hunt. So maybe Omari, we can shift this to the trade.
Yeah.
We've talked Brandon Ingram. I don't know what the other name is out there. Maybe Julius Randle. Like,
it's just looking at teams that just need to shed, right? You know, I don't know if and that's the thing with New York. Like, do they need to shed? Do they come away from last season like we don't need Julius, or is it still he's a good guy to have next to Brunson? When you look around the league, you have teams like Minnesota, you have teams like Atlanta that probably need to shed some salary.
DeJounte Murray.
Like, which players in your mind are you sort of targeting as potential options? Not even guys that are like you have to give up an asset to get the Pistons to want them, but like genuine rotation guys that they may have to shed.
Yeah. I'm thinking like a guy who I think about in that vein is Wiggins, just because like Golden State is really facing a cap crunch for a team that does not look like one that they were like even 2 years ago when they won the championship. And so like again, like if you're trying to build an asset base, like you could do far worse than like letting Andrew Wiggins come and like just be athletic and like simplify his role, and Golden State like gives you some stuff to take on that contract. Another guy I've seen the Zach LaVine rumors kind of resurface.
Sure.
And that's something that like similar to Malik Monk, like I get it, but I don't love it, but I get it. And so like that's a name that like I waffle very hard back and forth on Zach LaVine. Julius Randle, no thank you. From a fan perspective, I don't want to watch 70 games of Julius Randle. Like I just don't. Like I don't find his game like aesthetically appealing, and I don't want to watch it. And then last but not least, like Ingram. I really like Ingram. I think there's a lot of star potential there. Like he's played at an all NBA level for stretches in his career. And I think that having a secondary like wing creator, shot creator like next to Cade would be really beneficial for Cade in the future and like moving forward. But like again, like I don't know how I feel about that next contract. And he also occasionally displays like a complete reluctance to shoot threes, even though he's like a not bad shooter. And so it's like if he's gonna not shoot, like if he's gonna shoot 2 threes a game for like 3 weeks on end, like I don't know how I feel about that either. So the going star hunting, I don't love as much as just like trying to build a good asset base.
Real quick, guys, as well. Just because we talked about Obi Toppin doesn't mean we think Obi Toppin is like the one and only move that we think Detroit should make. Like I just want to, I want to bring that up as well. Like, yeah, even if you paid him $13 million, there's still $50 more million, a draft pick, trades, those type of things. Laz, you mentioned earlier that this team is really closing in on a consolidation trade with some of its young pieces. So I think we're just trying to bring up different guys. I don't want anybody to get a misconception that we're saying, hey, Obi Toppin solves all the Pistons issues. They're going to go win 30 games. Like, no, like that takes them to 17. Somebody else takes them to a little bit more, like those type of things. Like it's all part of there's a lot of moving parts here. I think that's why it's hard this offseason is because there's money, there's the young guys, there's a draft pick, all of those things together just makes it hard, Omari, to figure out what is because you really can't make one move, Omari, it seems like, without kind of knowing what the other moves around it are also going to be.
And that's what makes it so interesting is that, I think Trajan has to figure out this team's readiness. And you look at a 14-win team and it's like, well, obviously nobody's ready because they just won 14 games. But you still have to sort of pick a path, right? Like how, like, do you want to go 10 out of 10? Like, let's just get the best possible talent we can get. Or is it more so that conservative, let's just get NBA players? Because there's a lot of just mid-tier guys who could come in and really serve roles. Like I had a free agency story go up to today, but even a guy like Kyle Anderson or Taurean Prince, or like, it's just a lot of just solid wings who can defend and or shoot that I think would upgrade the talent for this team a lot. We have about 6-7 minutes. We have a few questions here that we can start to get into.
Yeah, I want to go back to let's go back to the draft real quick, and then Kyle asked an interesting question. Just I think we can make it general. You said you have Khalil Ware thoughts. I need Khalil Ware thoughts here, Laz.
Okay, so I'm not like we should trade back into the first to get Khalil Ware, but like that guy was. Like, I feel very much like Troy Weaver, where I'm like, that was an elite high school prospect. Like he stayed the extra year and like got a lot better under Mike Woodson at Indiana, with a skill set in shot blocking and perimeter shooting that at like from a big that I think the Pistons could really use. But he's weird. He doesn't like he doesn't do enough of the good stuff to make you feel confident that like that's who he's going to be as an NBA player. He also, I would love to interview him, or like if I was like Langdon, I'd love to like get in a room with him and like, how good do you think you are? Right? Like, do you think like, are you going to come in and be like, no, Jalen Duren, like I'm the starting center? Because like that's probably not going to be the case. But if you're ready to come in and like be a role player, be a guy who is willing to like listen to coaching and like fill a role that we need for this team, that is something I would be interested in for the Pistons.
Khalil is hard, man, because I love the archetype and I think it's so valuable. Mm-hmm. And listen, I don't play the intel game. Like it just gets too convoluted. I've heard that he's interviewed well and stuff like that. So for people who aren't familiar, Khalil Ware has major motor concerns. Like that's been one of the biggest things that people have talked about going back to high school. I think some of those were answered with his play this year. And again, I've heard a little bit that maybe he's interviewed well and those type of things. Listen, Zuop, like don't bring up DaRon Holmes with me because we'll be here for another hour. So like you guys got to learn.
I was waiting for the DaRon Holmes mention.
Y'all want to bring up DaRon Holmes and this show's about to go off the rails. That is my guy. You can go go get my receipts. I was tweeting about him months ago. And so and of course, all of this is trading back, guys. Like nobody's taking Khalil Ware, DaRon Holmes at number 5. Also got to shout out one of my students, Brian, joined in on the fun here. So what's up, Brian?
Hey, Bryce, where are you at with Devin Carter? Because that's a guy like I haven't done my like dive on him yet, but like that's another guy I keep seeing is like, ooh, that may be interesting as like a trade down guy.
Yeah, Devin Carter's really interesting, really risen. He tested. I know we talked about this testing stuff earlier, but he tested well. So I think people like very athletic. I think in ESPN's thing today, they called him the most clutch player. My thing he's going to really defend.
Yep.
He can play a little bit on the ball. I don't know that like you're drafting him to be your primary guy. He shot it insanely well this season. And one of my hesitations.
Is that real or not?
Yes, that's the thing with Carter. So I was on a podcast recently where we were just like swooning over him. And I was like, okay, we need to pump the brakes a little bit. He is 22 years old already. And before this year, he hadn't shot over 30% from 3. He's right on the borderline 72% free throw shooter, but he made 38% on 6.6 attempts this year. Like, and the shot like has a little bit of a hitch, like, and it's a moon ball. I do have a few concerns, but I think he's going to be a good two-way guard that's a little bit combo-y where he can operate a ball screen, run your offense at times. He's getting a lot of love right now, though. Like, you know, at one point it was Devin Carter to Miami, and now people are talking about him up to Sacramento and even higher. So, yeah, like he does take some crazy shots, but their best player tore his ACL. And so he kind of got thrust into a role where he had to be the dude, and he really rose to the occasion. So Carter's interesting. Omari, your dad asked a question. What about an overpay for Toppin? Not leaving New York, Hartenstein if Kling isn't there. So you got thoughts on that offseason?
Yeah. And I guess I'm curious, just how much would it take to pry Hartenstein away to the point to where he's like, I'm not going to try to run it back with New York. Like if you gave him, there's a team option at the end, 3 years, like 100 even. So it's essentially 2 years, 66. Is that way too much?
That's so much money.
That was a lot of money. Is that too much?
That's a lot of money.
Kyle, you can put this in there because I'm pretty sure Hartenstein's in a situation where they can only offer him so much.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Like it's the early bird right stuff. I think it's similar to the Malik Monk thing. And so it's either Hartenstein has to sign for less, or I believe it was Bobby Portis who signed like a 1+1 so they could get full bulge right.
Decline the one and
and all of that. And then you decline the second and sign the bigger. So Kyle Metz says under 17 million. So yeah, it's 4 for 68 or something like that, whatever it is. And so I think you can get to 20. You can get Hartenstein for 20 if he wants to leave New York.
Yeah,
like he's really thrived there, and so it's interesting. What do you think, Laz?
Mitchell Robinson is like ostensibly the starting center, but like has had injury concerns too, in a way that means that like if I had signed in New York for 17, like I could still be the starter. Like I could still get to play a lot, right? And I like Tibbs. Tibbs trust me. I don't see really why he would leave New York.
Yeah. I like this question from Kyle. Speaking of, is rim protection or spacing more important for the Pistons at the 5? I think this is a tough question because it kind of goes to like the rest of the roster. But for you, Laz, like which do you think? We just talked about Deron Holmes. This is the appeal with Khalil Ware that maybe he spaces the floor. Yeah. What do you think?
Rim protection. Boston is showing us that like if you can get both in the same dude, like that's great. But I think you have to. The offenses are so good in today's NBA that like if you don't have a level of rim protection, I think you're just going to get beat repeatedly in a way that is not conducive to winning or like even like forming good habits as a basketball team with where this team is at. So like if you gave me a choice between like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a big who only shoots threes and like doesn't defend. But like you don't even see that guy in the NBA anymore because rim protection is so important. But yeah, like I would take like Rudy Gobert like on this team, like at over mythical guy who could only shoot threes and doesn't do
like it would almost be like the Gobert versus Towns, right? Like
yeah,
wouldn't that be a little bit of this argument?
Yeah, and Gobert's a way better player.
Yeah. So Kyle says follow up, and then we'll get you out of here unless Omari has something else. Can Asar play with a non-floor spacing big?
Not right now, but you hope that eventually he learns how to, because otherwise he's like not going to make it as an NBA player. Yeah. Is that if you have to shift around the entire roster to accommodate one guy who's not even your main guy, like maybe that guy is just not as important as you like otherwise think. But yeah, and you would hope that teams work around two non-shooters like offensively. You see other teams do it. The Warriors with like Draymond and another big, like there was stuff that you could do as a non-shooting player. There's like dribble handoffs, but you'd still hope Asar's like, locked in the gym, like figuring out his shots. That's not even something you're worried about.
For sure.
No doubt. I don't have anything else. Laz, it's always a massive pleasure having you on the pod. This was the perfect time to do it for sure. Now we're sort of in the crossroads of things are starting to get going, but they haven't fully gotten going yet. If you want to tell the people where they can find you, feel free.
Yeah. Again, Omari and Bryce, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I love the work you guys do, and I love the progression you guys have made over the course of the life of this podcast. People can follow me on Twitter at Last Chance. That's at LAZCHANCE. I am still affiliated with Detroit Bad Boys, and you should go to DetroitBadBoys.com and check out the work we're doing over the course of this offseason. Things are slow for us as well. We're doing our big thing now is we're doing our big mock offseason, but it's different users control all 30 NBA teams. And so like right now we're just like all making trades with each other, like blowing up a bunch of teams. Nice. It's great.
That sounds chaotic.
Yeah, it's very chaotic. but thank you guys for having me.
No, always. Bryce, you have anything?
No, I mean, whenever Laz comes on, the hour goes crazy fast.
It does go
So
fast.
we appreciate you very much. Glad you're doing well. Yes, make sure you check out Detroit Bad Boys, the website, the YouTube, where our guy Wes Davenport has a pod over there with the pin down. Just make sure you guys are tuning into all of that stuff. Tons of great Pistons content all over the place. And we'll have Laz back very soon because we appreciate him so much and we have such a blast.
No doubt. But before I close this out, I just wanted to give a very, very big thanks to our Spurs Senator Kirkland Crawford. His last day at the Free Press is this week. I can't tell you what his first year at the Free Press is because he's been there for so long, but he's been the Spurs Senator for our desk almost going on 4 years now. So almost the entire time I've been at the Free Press. We're going to miss Kirk a lot. And he's the executive producer of our pod too. And it's been a very, very big supporter from day one. So Kirk, best of luck. Thank you for everything. And with that, I'll close this out. So big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and our executive producer, Kirkland Crawford. And big thanks to Wes as always. And we'll talk to you all next week.